What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Golf 360 podcast. I'm the host, Pete Popovich. So you may be asking yourself, what is Golf 360? And Golf 360 is a show that was designed to introduce you to people associated with the game of golf to help you improve not only at your game, but also your life. Almost all of our guests are from within the industry in some way, shape, or form, but some of the guests we have are from outside the industry, and it mainly revolves around the business world with a few others scattered in here and there. Now, all of the guests that we have a few things in common. One, they all were highly successful and accomplished in their field. Two, each has something to pass along that will help you in your game and your life. And three, they were all more than willing to give back by passing along the things that they use to help them in their career, and even some of the mistakes that they made so that others don't make them in their journey. So I hope you find listening to them as enjoyable as I did interviewing them, and that each and every one of you benefits from the information that they so willingly and graciously pass along. This podcast is brought to you in part by Just Thrive Probiotic. You may be surprised to learn that your digestive system is the key to creating and maintaining the quality of your physical, mental, and emotional health, and it's one of the body's most essential systems. That's why the majority of nutritionists today highly recommend probiotics as an indispensable nutritional supplement. As a discriminating consumer, you've probably been searching for a probiotic that is proven, potent, and effective, and you found it. Just Thrive is your best choice for maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Just Thrive Probiotic captures the power of hundreds of thousands of years of nature's design with a specialized bacillus strain formulation that guarantees survivability through the stomach and upper digestive system. Supports optimum gut health, digestive health, immune health, and delivers antioxidants. Great for adults, kids, and the whole family. Use promo code GOLF360 at www.thriveprobiotic.com for 10% off your order. This podcast is brought to you in part by Old South Golf Links. A short ride across a bridge from Hilton Head Island is one of the area's finest golf courses and a hidden treasure. Set up on towering pines and ancient oaks with sweeping marsh vistas, truly makes Old South Golf Links a one-of-a-kind golfing experience. The Clyde Johnson design was named one of the top 10 new public courses when it opened, and it also takes full advantage of the natural beauty of the Low Country. Old South is a fun and unique challenge for golfers of every skill level and a favorite of both locals and visitors. Whether it's your first time here or you're a regular, you'll be treated and feel like family. From the bag drop to check-in at the fully stocked pro shop with both men's and women's apparel, to breakfast or lunch before or after your round, the staff is always ready and willing to help. Experience for yourself why Old South is one of the premier golf courses in the Hilton Head area and why it will quickly become a favorite of yours too. Visit them in person or online at www.oldsouthgolf.com, or to make it tee time, simply call the pro shop at 843-785-5353. Hey, what's up, golfers? Welcome to another edition of the Golf 360 podcast. I don't think there's anyone out there listening that wouldn't just love to increase the distance that they hit the ball by 10, 20, even 30 yards or more. Because in the modern era of golf, distance has definitely become king of the mountain and something everybody is in search of. And it seems like science continues to bring us another way to gain distance all the time, be it through the golf ball, hotter face drivers, lighter shafts, time in the gym, or even a magic pill here and there. Golfers are willing to try just about anything to pick up more distance. And why not? It's been shown that the easiest way to lower your scores is to simply hit the ball longer. One way to do that is to increase your swing speed. Now, today's guest, along with the device that he helped co-found and co-create, is doing that, and he's doing it for everybody. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone from weekend hackers all the way up to the best touring professionals on the planet, as well as everybody in between. And it seems like everybody is picking up distance as a result. This was a very interesting conversation as we get into how his product works, as well as a lot of the science behind it. And whether you agree with him or not, there's one thing that's difficult to argue, and that is golfers are hitting the ball longer as a result of using his product. So please give a warm welcome to my guest, SuperSpeed Golf's co-founder, Michael Napoleon. Okay, Golf 360 podcast. I'm here with SuperSpeed Golf co-founder Michael Napoleon. Mike, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So we got a lot to talk about. You guys got a great product. It's getting attention and growing. I would what appears to be exponentially, which is great for you guys and everybody that uses it. And then so what I did was on social media, I put out a lot of I noted excuse me, I was having you on. Anybody have questions, and got a number of people that gave feedback and wanted me to ask questions. Both people who are kind of ambassadors of yours, Andrew Rice and Martin Chuck, Tim Cook, all local guys and all who have been on the podcast. And then a couple of people who I would say respectfully challenged some of the things that you guys are doing. And I don't think they did it in a negative way. I think they just had some different ideas, and it's great that you're coming on that you can maybe elaborate as we get into this on those, and maybe change their mind or shed some light on where you came up with your stuff and so forth. But the conversation continues because everyone I think is looking to help golfers in general, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we're open to discuss everything. I mean, we are an open book here at SuperSpeed. I mean, we've done a lot of research on the way we do our training, the way we do our protocols. And look, there's certainly more than one way to help people get better with speed and power. We've found one very specific way with Overspeed training that is extremely useful on a very wide spectrum. But again, we're coaches, and our background is from a very comprehensive coaching background as well. So this was something that we didn't just, launch a product and had an idea to do. I mean, this was something that, we spent years really developing the details of, to find ways to make it optimal, and then also to find ways for it to reach the widest audience possible as we got it out into the marketplace. So yeah, absolutely. I'm always happy to answer questions from both those that can be a little skeptical and also, those that are our supporters. So,
well, I'm glad you explained it that way, because so many people who maybe are diehards and it has to be a certain way, or it's you have to do things the right way, which is obviously interpretable. But you guys, not only did you, like you said, you had it appeals to a broad, but you also have details and you have programs that help at different levels, right? At least from
sure.
what I gathered on researching your stuff best I could. So, and again, I plan on getting in all that. Hope you have the time to do it, and that, this is a forum to do so.
Absolutely.
But if I could go back a little bit to the beginning, just to get a little background on it, is what was the genesis of the idea, and how, where did it come from, start to finish, and just kind of tell us the story a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were actually at the time, my business partner Kyle Shea and I were running a golf performance academy company in the Chicago market called Catalyst Golf Performance, which is still going, by the way. Actually, a good friend of mine, another great coach named Marty Evans, actually is running that entire operation now. And he's doing a great job with it. Our goal there, we were very, I've been working very closely with the guys at TPI since about 2007. So, our idea there was to create a very comprehensive, sort of holistic coaching environment, mainly targeted at your, normal amateur golfers, country club golfers in the Chicago market, but really to, kind of look at every single aspect that could possibly affecting their game negatively and find the most efficient ways to help them get better. So that was our goal there. And what we tried to do under one roof was have golf coaches and fitness professionals and medical professionals and equipment fitting and basically all of the things that may be, affecting someone's game, we would be able to take care of no matter who came in with what issues. So about 4 or 5 years into running that business, which was going very well, we actually had 4 locations by 2014. We started in 2010. Well, one of the things that we saw, we actually heard an incredible presentation by Dr. Tom House at the TPI World Golf Fitness Summit about a lot of the coaching he'd been doing with Major League Baseball players using different weighted balls to help them increase arm velocity. It was a training that I guess either he had called or had been called in the baseball world overload underload training for a long time. And, there were some very kind of crude ways of potentially trying to do it for the golf swing to help people swing faster. And we sort of looked at that and took it back to our academies where again, we were lucky. We had all the technology. We had launch monitors and 3D motion capture systems and everything we needed to really research and figure out exactly what was going on during a person, what was really going on in the biomechanics and mechanically and everything else when somebody was going through this type of training. And through that, we sort of found that there were ways to optimize overspeed training. I'll talk about that in a second. Actually, we changed the name of it for a very specific reason. But we found that, there's definitely like a right answer to how much lighter than the player's club that you should use and how much heavier you should use. Like there's a very specific weighting breakdown that optimizes the training. We did a whole bunch of other research there just to find ways to make this better. And about a year and a half after that was when we launched SuperSpeed Golf. And that was in the fall of 2014. And since then, we've been just sort of off to the races with this, really trying to just, I would say stay in that very specific niche lane of helping people increase speed.
What is your background in golf instruction, or is it in fitness and training and in neuroscience? What's the background that you have?
Mine is golf coaching. I'm kind of as big of a golf nerd as you could possibly imagine when it comes to swing coaching and biomechanics, all kinds of those different applied sciences that we're looking at how people swing, really measuring the efficiency of that motion. And I would say if there's one thing that I've found in my career, working with golfers, is that as a coach, my job is always to get the most out of that player. It's not necessarily about me sounding the smartest in that lesson or giving them the most information, but it's to help them with whatever goal they have to accomplish that in the fastest way possible. And I've always looked at that as like a gold standard of coaching. And one of the things that I learned early on, going through the process of learning how to be a better coach, I think was that means that I need to be very flexible because every single player is different. There's a different optimal way for that player to swing a club efficiently. And in order to be able to maximize that for every player that comes in, I've pretty much got to know all of the different swing methodologies, all the different swing techniques, and how to really assess and figure out what's going to be best for each one of those players. So that was one of the things that was really interesting in the education I've had in my career as a golf coach, was trying to be able to be very flexible so that I could help anyone that comes through the door. The thing that we found with SuperSpeed, when we started really looking at this type of training, we kind of found that we were looking at a new type of training that hadn't really been done in the golf world very much, because we weren't really changing the mechanics of the swing that much. We weren't really changing the physicality of the player that much. We were really just helping that player access more speed that they already had, that they just didn't, their brain literally wasn't letting them use. So when we found that, we actually found that regardless of what type of swing that player had, or regardless of some of the different underlying factors that would cause me to be very specific about how I would coach them mechanically, I could pretty much do the same program with them from an overspeed training standpoint as I would the next person that might have a very significantly different mechanical swing. So when we saw that, we started to see that this was much more universally applicable to golfers of all shapes and sizes, basically. And that was when we really started to go all in on the idea of really making this something that was going to be widespread in the industry.
Yeah, because really before you guys, the only thought process, so to speak, on training for speed was to use a weighted club, right? And I never bought into that theory that you should use it exclusively, because heavy produces force, but it doesn't produce centrifugal force. And flexing does not coincide with the subconscious awareness, nor does it take into consideration understanding of torque and or head weight rotation and things like that. So what you guys, it was nice to see somebody come out with basically the opposite of what the common theory was.
Sure.
And then you do have, like you said, science behind it. But so can you elaborate on what some of the science and the data that you guys had?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you hit on a really good point there. And I want to preface this with saying that, there are uses for like just a heavy club or something that adds resistance to the swing. Mm-hmm. Specifically, we find that for players that don't sequence well, those can be very effective to help that person get the feel of understanding what it feels like to sequence better and lead with the lower body a little bit better in their golf swing. The problem is that if you do that training for excessive amounts of reps or a long time, there's a neuromuscular phenomenon that we've kind of started to deal with this overspeed training, where, well, the background will be this: like, every movement that we do in the world is controlled by a motor program in our brain. So you have like this giant library of motor programs in your brain. When you step on the tee to hit your drive on the first hole, your brain selects the motor program for hit driver, and then you run that program. When that happens, your brain sends a signal to your body. That signal, it's an electrical impulse, basically goes down your central nervous system, arrives at your muscles, and then your muscles respond to that coded signal to produce the movement. After, very much as it's happening, there's also a feedback mechanism that happens where there's a feedback where your brain either kind of understands that was the expected result that happened, or that, something different happened that time a little bit. And there can be a lot of these micro variances in the neuromuscular response to a motor program that can be extremely important when we start to look at consistency and things like that on the golf course. Well, what we've found is that it doesn't take a very high number of reps. I mean, I'm talking 3 to 5 reps for your brain to change that expectation of what your body's going to do when you pull the trigger on that swing. So if you swing a heavy club 7, 8 times in a row, and let's say that it's 20% heavier than your driver, we've seen that a 20% heavier club than your driver, on average, will slow somebody down by usually somewhere between about 8 and 12% of their normal swing speed. Mm-hmm. So somebody that's swinging 100 miles an hour can only swing that club in the high 80s. Well, what happens there is that your brain starts to expect this kind of slower rotational response from the body. And if you go back to your actual club, what you're going to find then is that you'll actually be swinging a lot slower than you were right before you did that with the heavy club. TPI did a great study on this in baseball, actually. I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago. It had a number of collegiate players in, minor league players, like pretty good athletes, and had them do like a warm-up program using like 2 bats together, or like a really heavy donut on the bat. And then, so measured their bat speed before they did that, then did the training with the heavy bat, the warm up with the heavy bat, then had them swing right after that. They found that on average, and those were a little heavier than 20%, I think they were maybe 30 or 40. I don't have the exact number there, but they found on average the players' they lost 30% of their normal bat speed on the first swing out of the gate, and didn't get within 5% of the same as their normal bat speed until like the 4th or 5th swing after, the 4th or 5th swing with their game bat after they did the training. So like that was kind of like one of those to kind of prove like, why in the world are these guys using donuts in the on deck circle in major leagues? Like you're shooting yourself in the foot from a speed standpoint. And I mean, if you're not going to get your normal bat speed back until the 4th or 5th one after you've done that training, I mean, in the majors, you're already out. So like, we gotta figure this out.
Yeah, it gets into more muscle recruitment for heavier apparatus that the person's trying to move. So you're losing synaptic firing, which means now you're recruiting a different neural pattern, which means you're recruiting a different blueprint, like you already said. So it's a complete changing of the pattern that's already been developed.
So what I would say there is that it's not a changing of the pattern that's been developed. So we've found that the motor program tends to be very difficult to change. In fact, you can't really change a motor program. You can only make a new one. And you can use there's a lot of research on how that works, as far as like taking one motor program and it kind of is a template for a new one. And that's actually a lot of what we do as coaches.
Right. Poor use of word on my part. You're right. It doesn't change.
But the point being is this: the response to that signal. Think of that motor program as it sends a signal, and then a response happens to that signal. The response to that signal can change. And that's the whole point that we have kind of proven with those studies with the donuts that slow people down. And then also with the studies that we've done with the slightly lighter weight objects, again, not too light that we're not running the same motor program, but, light enough that basically the player feels like it's exactly the same as their club. And then, but their body can move a lot faster due to that reduced resistance. We can literally reset the player's reaction speed to that motor program. And that's kind of the whole just of overspeed training.
So is it that motor programming stays close enough to what their actual programming is for swinging a club, but it's modified slightly because of the weight? Is that
Yeah, I would say the motor program never changes. It's just because there's a little less weight, the speed of the response has less resistance. So that response has less resistance, therefore it can move faster. And what happens is in that phase, like as it's happening, where there's that feedback system between your brain and body, what's happening there is your brain's starting to remember. It's like, oh, I guess something's different today. It can go a lot faster. And then your brain starts to expect that faster speed in just a handful of swings with each one of these. That's why, like, when you see somebody go through our training, and we've done this study with, I'd say thousands of people at this point, where, like, if you take, our clubs, one of them, the first club's 20% lighter than the player's driver, the next one's 10% lighter, and the third one is 5% heavier than the driver. Now, if we measure the player's club speed hitting a ball prior to the training, and we look at what that club speed was, let's say it was 100 miles an hour, we'll find that on average, players can swing that green club between 118 and 120 miles an hour. So that's like 18 to 20% faster than their normal swing speed, right? Like, it's a lot faster. Well, the next thing we'll find is then, only in just a handful of swings, like in our protocols, then we'll go to that blue club that we're adding a little resistance back. So it's 10% lighter than the driver. It's a little bit heavier. We'll still see that player on average be swinging that club between about 15 and 17% faster than their normal speed. So they'll still be at 115 to 117. Then we'll go to that club that's 5% heavier than their driver. Now, during the training, because we just did that little, like, expectation neuromuscular reset with those light clubs, we'll still see a player swinging the red club, which is 5% heavier than their driver, usually on average between 10 and 12% faster than their normal swing speed. When we were doing our research and we saw that, and we saw that we could see a player swinging 12% faster than their normal swing speed with a club that's 5% heavier than their driver, we knew there had to be more going on here as far as how the neurological system was controlling the body than kind of was previously thought with the old, like, donut theories. But that was also one of the things when we found that, we were like, there's a lot to this. There's something going on here, and we continue to do a lot of research to figure it out. So that's kind of what you see happen during the training. Now, the cool thing is, though, is if you gave that person our red club, which is 5% heavier than their driver, if you gave them that first and you did that one at the very beginning of the training and measured the speed would actually go down because of the increased resistance. But because we can reset that neuromuscular system and reset, what your brain's expecting when that motor program fires, we can create those significant increases in speed, again, without really changing much about the mechanics or the biomechanics of that player's swing.
Do you, as the synapses grow closer together, so as they start to connect the neurons and that neural patterning, do you find out that the weights of the clubs, that the range that you guys have come up with help promote that? In other words, if their swing, let's say their swings groove, for lack of a better technical term, and their synaptic firing happens very quickly. So you're obviously, the goal of what you guys are doing is trying to make that happen even faster, right?
So I think this would be an easy way to, answer what you're getting at here. Like, as you get to more elite players, you don't really see the increase in club speed go down that much. Like, it's about a 5% gain in effective club speed. Hitting balls before to hitting balls after is what we've seen in the studies we've done across age group, skill level. Mm-hmm. What's happening in this is, let's take it this way. Your brain puts a limiting factor on how fast your body can move for a lot of different reasons, or it can put a limiting factor on range of motion for a lot of different reasons. One of the big ones being, like, injury, pain. This would be a common thing that you'd see, right?
Protect the body is the brain's number one function, right? Or one of them.
Absolutely. So what happens there, though, is just through normal, life elements, we tend to not use 100% of our athletic potential in really anything that we do in athletics. So what we're really finding on a big picture level, what we're doing is we're allowing your brain to access speed that player already is capable of doing, that for one reason or another, your brain is just kind of shut off or limited or put a governor on to a certain point, and we're just kind of lifting that governor off and allowing that to go faster, and through that training kind of proving to the brain that the body's going to be able to safely move at that speed, and there we go, we get speed increase.
To that point, and I've had a number of world-class trainers and therapists and so forth on and consult with them on a regular basis around the world. One thing that almost basically all of them agree on is the stronger that they can make somebody, the more that the central nervous system, i.e. the brain, is going to allow them to swing faster. So I guess that, and hearing you say what you just said sounds very similar to that. I
would say that there's, again, we're not claiming in any way to be like a physical training device. I 100% believe that as people get stronger, get more stable, get more functionally mobile, can control range of motion, I mean, all of those different physical aspects certainly give them more potential for speed and power. I guess what I'm saying is that wherever somebody is starting, they're not functioning, even that if you take a snapshot of them that day, let's say that on average, and this is just a guess, but I think it's a pretty good clinical guess at this point, they're probably functioning between 65 and 80% of what their body's actually capable of doing, and their brain's just limiting a lot of that down for one reason or another. So if I have a player functioning at 70%, and I put them through a training that even on a small level kind of lifts the governor a little bit or allows the brain to let the body move a little bit faster during that motion, they only go up to 75 or 76% of their athletic potential. That's still enough to give them a 6-7 mile an hour jump in club speed.
Mm-hmm. How do you coordinate? Because you work with the TPI guys. So how do you coordinate someone, let's say their training protocol and their gym time, and incorporate what you guys do as well?
Yeah, I mean, I just look at it in sort of a good, better, best sort of way, right? So, I mean, we've created our training system and the warm-up program that goes along with it on our website, so that anybody, because we're trying to speak to a huge audience, right, all over the world, all at once. So we've tried to create that program where anybody can pick this up, go through the warm-up. If there's no pain or anything involved going on, safely go through the training and get increase in swing speed. And so on a good level, base level is what you can do just by going to our website and doing it all yourself. I think a better way to do it, than that even, would be if you did work with some type of fitness professional and they could assess all the other aspects of the physicality that you present with and all those different physical characteristics, help you work on a lot of those strength and mobility and stability and range of motion and motor control things, alongside doing this kind of training. I think it's obviously an even better way to do it. If, best would be that you have an entire team, right? Like you're doing Overspeed training in our product is just one practice aspect of your overall program, where you're working with a golf coach to accomplish goals, and that's coordinated with a fitness professional that's helping you to support the things the golf coach is doing. And if there's ever things that you need to do to help range of motion, you can see medical people that can help with all that type of treatment. I mean, that's obviously best case scenario for anyone, and generally what we see nowadays out on tour. But yeah, so it's like a good, better, best kind of deal. Like we wanted to create a product that everybody could use, could get benefit from, and could get benefit from safely, which I think we've accomplished at this point, and we're very proud of. But I'm not going to take anything away from expert coaches and teams out there. Obviously, I would say a vast majority of them use our products as a part of an overall coaching and training regimen for a player.
As we live in the information age and everybody's bombarded with information, people listening to this or hearing this, and maybe they listen to other podcasts. I hope not too many other ones. I hope that they pick up information from other places. And you have science has become a very big term, especially in the golf world. And what you see is a lot of people claiming one thing, and then they might argue or debate with someone else that claims another science. And as I watch these things, it's like, yeah, you're both camps are right, because both of their sciences are correct. And what I've started to discern is how do you, the better question to ask if you want a better answer is how do you determine which protocol is better for that particular individual based off what they're working with? And you touched on a little bit, and I guess that's leading to my question is how do you discern if somebody requires speed or they require more power to sustain that peak? Because you can take somebody who can bench press 300 pounds but has never trained in speed, and that's like an untapped well. The same as you can, right? The same as you can train. Someone's been training in with your product, but they don't have the base of a weight training protocol, and they're not able to produce power. So that power equals force plus speed. So it's like an equation, right? Is there? Have you done any research on that, or with the TPI group or anybody else?
Sure. Well, again, I guess again, anybody that's starting, it depends on where they are, right? The nice thing for our product and our type of training with Overspeed training is that, as you said, it's kind of like an untapped well. I would say that for 98 plus 99% of golfers, it's an untapped well. Like even professional players, most of the time have never done this type of work or this type of training. So everyone's kind of starting from ground zero. That's why we see such universal success with the program. But again, what I would say is this: if somebody comes in and they're not very strong and they're not very stable and those kind of things are there, in a perfect world, I think it would be ideal to work on that for a little bit before you really implemented a lot of a speed program for that player. However, there's a lot of those people that don't have trainers and don't have golf coaches, and they still want to get some more out of what they're already starting with. What we found is that, this is just what we've seen over and over and over again, is that player, even if they have a lot of other things that they could or should be working on, will still get a pretty significant increase in speed from doing the neurological side. Because again, it's like an untapped well for that player too. Now, again, if I'm looking for gold standard coaching, I'm going to set that person up with a full team of people, and we're going to incorporate this exactly at the right time to make it optimal for their program. But again, the vast majority of golfers in the world don't have access to that type of training and coaching.
What would you say, as we're kind of on that topic, would be the biggest misunderstanding about SuperSpeed?
Biggest misunderstanding? I think the biggest misunderstanding that people have is that it's a tool used for warm-up. That I think comes primarily from people seeing a lot of guys on tour using it before rounds of golf. But I think that is probably the biggest misconception. It's, speed training is not a warm-up tool. What you're seeing a lot of those players do that have been using it for years now is it does, even though, in 3 years in, you're probably in a pretty stable plateau phase with the neurological training side, where you're not getting a big before and after jump right when you do the training. But what it is doing is it's getting all of the motor units in that player's body firing. It's like their nervous system just gets on, like, it's like they turn the volume knob up and all of the motor units in their body firing. And that allows them to actually create a very consistent point right before a round where they're kind of like, let's call them there at 100% on the whole firing and just neurological programming side right before the round. And that allows them to start their golf round in the same state every time. So that's kind of one of the misconceptions that we do see with it sometimes.
Do you see some misunderstandings from, let's say, some very educated people or professionals within their industry that I'm not going to say they're detractors of yours, but what would you say to them that you're getting feedback on, that they're saying, well, this doesn't work because of X, or we don't agree with Mike and those guys because of Y? Is there something that you're seeing on that? Because now that you're out there, right, it's like you achieve some success, and then it's not someone wants to tear you down, I don't think, but maybe they disagree, as we talked about various sciences in the industry. What are you seeing coming from that camps out there that might have that?
We don't see a whole lot. There's a lot of different coaches out there that might have a slightly altered protocol that they like to use with our stuff, or they like to do things slightly at a different time in a player's program. But we don't see a lot. I don't know of very many that just kind of flat out say, wow, I've never seen this work, because we take random people at random at hundreds at a time in clinics and things all over the world, and you'll see nearly 100% success rate on the very first session that somebody does this. So it's very hard to argue with the mountain of clinical data, basically, that of just, time and time again, seeing this work, seeing people get gains, seeing people, create permanency in those gains. Like, it just works on such a wide scale that it's very hard to argue with. I think there's more debate maybe about exactly, exactly what's happening in the neuromuscular chain that's causing that. I think the other question that points to that is that I think there are some other elements that improve for players, depending on where they're starting, that can be a contributing factor to the speed gains that they get. Like, and, for example, like somebody that doesn't use the ground well in their swing at all, so has extremely, low numbers on ground reaction force of all kinds and just doesn't use the ground very well. Throughout our protocols, I mean, there's a lot of drills in there that are actually targeted at helping a player use the ground more efficiently. So we'll see that player tend to get better at how they use the ground, or a player that sequences really poorly, that doesn't have, really any good stretch shortens going on through the core muscles of the body. A lot of our drills, we'll work on that, and we'll see that player that was really bad with that generally improve. And, so there's those areas where it doesn't necessarily work 100% the same way for every player, but the neurological piece works the same way for every player. And those extra fringe benefit pieces are different based on where a player starts.
Have you guys had the chance to do any more in-depth study on to find out if some people's, like you said, if their ground reaction forces are off, are you able to differentiate between, was there increase because of the super speed, or was it because now they're using the ground better? I mean, that's really splitting hairs. I'm just curious to know if you guys have done that.
I guess what I would say is that it would be really impossible to figure that out because you can't isolate the variables. Like I said, it depends on where a player starts. Let's take a player that does use the ground well, does sequence well, and does lag the club really well, right? So a player that's good in all those, they still get a gain based on the neurological part, okay? Almost 100% of the time we've seen with tour players. You take a player that doesn't use the ground well, doesn't sequence well, and doesn't lag the club well, they still get a gain based on the neurological side, but based on a lot of the different training and drills and things that we do through our protocols, there's a real high chance that some of those other things are going to improve as well. So I mean, as a coach, my goal is to help that player get what they want, which is to swing the club faster and hit the ball further, right? So I'm not sure that I care why specifically for every individual player, what percentage of it came from increasing ground reaction force or kinematics or just the neurological taking the governor off or increasing lag. Like, I'm not sure that it matters 100% exactly why it happens if they accomplish that goal.
Right. Yeah. If the goal is to pick up more speed and your protocol helps them, then you're right. Does it really matter? Is it worth the time? So I said it was splitting hairs. I was just curious to know if you guys had because you obviously have a lot of research. I was just curious to know if you guys had done any of that as well.
I mean, we've done a lot of it. I mean, I can tell you that, like, kinematic sequence, for example, we'll see, and I would probably equate this most to, like our step change of direction drill, double step drills, the drills that really work on sequencing. I think you see a definite increase in just the timing of the sequence during out the swing. And then I think the non-dominant training that we do in every one of our protocols, I mean, I did that before we had SuperSpeed with players to help really work on deceleration chain muscles in the body. Because again, when you swing on your non-dominant side, you're essentially loading, your backswing becomes all of the muscles for a right-handed golfer in the left side. That left side, having increased muscle activation and all that stuff happening in the left side, immediately impacts and influences positively the way those muscles are able to stabilize the segments in the downswing, which creates, faster rotational gain through those segments when you see that better deceleration chain. So, I mean, that's a big one. We've done a good bit of work now with both Body Track and also Swing Catalyst on a lot of ground reaction force studies. I mean, the numbers are mind-boggling on those sometimes. I mean, we'll see players increase their peak vertical force by 18 to 20% on a really regular basis. We've done a few of those demonstrations live with players that we had no idea if they were using the ground well or not, and seeing those same kind of gains. Again, back to the rotational sequencing side, like we'll see 15 to 20% gains in rotational velocity in like the pelvis torso segments, especially. So yeah, I mean, we've looked at a lot of that stuff. We see a lot of improvement also in just like timing of releasing the club. I mean, I would say that's all connected, right? Like if a player uses the ground better, that's going to help them sequence better, which is going to help them deliver the club to the ball better. So I don't know how much you can pull out individually of those three, but we definitely see all of those aspects tend to improve for people.
On the opposite side, swinging the training. So you're right-handed and you do the protocol where you're swinging left-handed. Is it the stability of the muscles going from one side of the body working concentrically and the other working eccentrically, and now you're switching that around that you think helps?
I mean, again, I'm not a physical trainer, and that's not my area of specialty. Mm-hmm. What I've discussed with a lot of experts in that field is the primary piece there is just activation of the other muscles. So like, a player that doesn't sequence very well, or, doesn't really like create good, doesn't create a good deceleration chain. Like we don't really see, I guess if we can go to the very basics here, like when you look at, what is actually making the pelvis stabilize or slow down, and we can look at that mainly as being like the torso firing, grabs onto the segment below, which causes that segment below to decelerate as the next segment stabilizes. So if the muscles that are involved with that process of grabbing on and making it stabilize so the next segment has something to fire off of, if those muscles aren't firing well or aren't active, obviously that process is not going to work as efficiently. So swinging on the non-dominant side tends to cause you to use a lot of those muscles that the player may or may not be using when they're making their downswing, but we're trying to get them kind of turned on, or we're just trying to flip the switch on a little bit that those muscles exist when we're making those non-dominant swings. And we go back to the dominant side, we tend to see a huge improvement in that overall sequencing.
Have you done swings where you swung left-handed? I'm assuming you're right-handed, right?
Yes.
Okay. Have you done swings where you did your left-handed swing and then turned around to right-handed, and your brain, the changeover in your brain is one of the weirdest feels I've ever experienced. It's just like it's kind of like if you put one hand in a bowl of hot water and one hand in a bowl of ice water. It's just, the brain can't comprehend it all at once.
Right. So, and again, we're trying to be probably, I mean, although we have a vast understanding of a lot of the extremely technical parts of what's going on in this golf swing, our training program and what we're helping people with is probably the least technical thing you'll ever see in your life. And that's on purpose, because we don't want to flood in all of that extra information. We just want a very simple goal that's going to help a lot of different things get better. I think that's part of it. I mean, that's part of developing a feel for what you're doing. And, if you have like one of the little radar devices, you can actually see how fast the club's going every time. It's a really wild phenomenon how fast it helps people, because, that player will get up there and make a swing, and let's say it's at 85. And then the next one, they'll really try to like tense up and go as hard as they can at it. And it might go down, and, it might go to 82. And they're like, wow, well, I guess that didn't work. And then the next one, maybe they won't. They'll loosen up a little bit. The sequencing will get a little bit better, and it'll go up to 87 or 88. And then that reinforcement right there of learning of what that player just learned, that feel of whatever that took to improve the efficiency of their swing just made them faster, and therefore that's going to help that learning process.
It's interesting how people think if they exert more force, they're going to swing faster, yet they actually slow down, isn't it?
I just think people don't consciously understand how to properly produce more efficient force. They feel like if they just tense everything up that it feels more powerful, but it's actually not. So it's just a disconnect where people don't really know how to swing faster. Our product's just helping them learn that.
Let me ask you about the thinking that you guys put into, or the data that you came up with to come up with the weight system. Yep. And how much to differentiate off of let's use a driver, for example. So how much percentage do you go below for the 2, and then above for the heavier.
Yeah, so the first one goes to 20% lighter. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We found, and it's a window, like it doesn't have to be exactly 20% lighter. We found that anywhere between about 15% and 25% lighter than the driver is going to be effective. So we just hit right in the middle at 20%. We found that if it got lighter than about 28 to 29% lighter than the player's driver, that we would see significantly different sequencing happen, different ground force patterns, mainly because the club was, it's like if you just swung a driver shaft by itself, you don't really need to engage your lower body or your core very much to make that swing because it's so light. Your brain goes to kind of like path of least resistance, right? And the
There's
easiest
no
way to make that
resistance,
swing
right?
fast is going to be more like hands and arms. So we found that that magic number was right around 20% lighter than the player's driver, where we would see a very similar to the same kinematic sequence and ground reaction patterns. So that it wouldn't change very much. And that's just kind of where we would say, okay, the player's firing the same motor program and it's very similar to their golf swing, right? And then on the heavy side, we found that if we got more than about 8 to 10% heavier than their driver, that on average, no matter what we did with those light clubs, most people would still slow down to slower than their normal swing speed. And we found that that wasn't very effective in permanency and creating big gains in the training. So that's why we landed on 5% heavy. There's been a lot of systems out there that kind of like, or not systems, but there's been a lot of training in the baseball world that used like the player's actual club as the middle one. We just tested it and we found that having 2 that were lighter and 1 that was slightly heavier gave us the best results. And we had like different groups of subjects we had a group testing like 50% light, even 20% heavy, and a group that tested 20% light, 10% light, 5% heavy, and a group that tested 40% light, 20% light, 10% light. So we had all these different testing groups that tested the different setups, and we found that this setup was consistently the most optimal to get the biggest gains for the groups.
How do you differentiate the weight systems, shaft flexes, and everything else from? You've got long drive guys, you've got tour pros, scratch golfers, mid to high handicap.
Yeah.
Well, what's the differentiation or the thought process behind that, right? Because you're not going to give a 20 handicapper the same thing you'd give Tim Cook or Jamie Sadlowski.
Close. I'd probably give them the same thing. Close. So here's the thing. Number one, we're not hitting balls during this training. So shaft flex doesn't make nearly as much of an impact because there's no ball flight involved here. We actually found that we want to give players a club that is, ideally the same length as their driver, because that's going to create the same arc resistance to their normal swing, and that has a stiffer shaft in it than whatever they're playing. So that's our goal. And the reason for that is that when you give somebody a shaft that's slightly stiffer than what they're used to playing, it promotes them to be more aggressive because they have to be more aggressive to create load in that shaft through the swing. So it's just like an indirect way to promote somebody to try to move it faster and try to, I would say, like download the club even more aggressively than they normally would with their club. You can feel that because if you get a club, like if you pick up like a, really, really whippy shafted club, it tends to feel good because it almost like slows you down because you got to kind of wait for it to catch up to you.
Yeah, it does slow you down. Absolutely does. Yeah.
So the opposite is also true. If you get something stiffer, you kind of will create more. You'll create more speed in that, just subconsciously because you're trying to get that same feel of letting the shaft load. So, and how much stiffer, we didn't find to have an appreciable difference from one to the next. So, I mean, all of the shafts in our training aid are fairly stiff comparatively. Now, for the long drive competitors, we'd want to try to match the length of their club. Okay, so those are longer. And then to get shafts that are stiffer than what they typically play, you got to go pretty crazy. I think the shafts in our long drive set CPM at like 335-ish. I mean, they're crazy. They're like quad X or better.
Yeah, and that's table roll graphite?
That's a very good question. I believe so. Yes.
I just know that I fairly well versed in the conversion rate between table roll and filament wound and some other in steel. I'm not trying to ask you, get you on the spot. I was just a curious question.
That is a very in-depth question on that. They are graphite shafts. I know that for sure. and I know they CPM around 335.
Yeah, that's pretty stiff.
It's very stiff. Yeah.
On the because I spent a number of years in doing some very in-depth club fitting. The when you get stiffer, in particular for anybody, because we're all human beings, but as you get into people who don't have as much strength. So if you're giving someone to the Havoc camps, right, from Caddyshack,
Sure.
and you're giving one to Phil Mickelson, and they're relatively similar, the Havoc camps are going to try to, like you said, they're going to try to generate more speed, but they're often going to try to generate it from a movement in the upper body, in particular the shoulders, and I.
Yeah.
And I over time I
Potentially.
saw that slow them down quite a
So
bit.
potentially, what I would say though is that with that player, that like more elderly player, and again, I mean, we're not, the shafts in our normal sets are not nearly that crazy of what I was talking. They're basically like an X Flex type shaft.
Okay.
Um, what we do find though is because all of the protocols and drills that we have in our protocols are basically there to work on sequencing, and because we've taken away that goal of having to hit the ball, we still find a lot of success even with those players going through this with those clubs. Like I'd be interested to test if like we did it with somebody had like a senior flex shaft and we gave them a regular or like a stiff in it. I'd be interested to see if we got any different results than if we gave them like the X Flex that's in ours currently. That is one that I haven't specifically tested, so I'm going to just kind of plead the fifth on not having the answer on that one. But my hunch is that the differences in results would be negligible. But again, that was something definitely to look at and test in the future.
When we're done, I'll message you the guy's name to talk to about that. That's the world genius on conversions and how that works
Sure.
and it functions and human body and brain and how it works with the shafts. You guys would could work well together and do some pretty cool work. What about the weights? If it's driver length, do the head weights run? Do the weights you guys have at the tip run about 190 to 200, 205 grams?
No, so the swing weights on ours are actually all, I believe, heavier than a normal driver would be. We tested it a few different ways on that as well, as far as where we put the weight on the shaft. From a physics standpoint, I mean, again, the further away, we're basically increasing resistance throughout the swing.
Mm-hmm.
So, if we were to move the weight back further on the shaft and balance it differently, we would just have to make that club either lighter or heavier, respectively, to find the same difference in resistance that we have. So, no, our head weights are actually, again, all the clubs are swing weighted very heavy. We found that to work the best, again, for promoting more aggressiveness during the training. That also is one that we found to tend to help players increase especially players that have like an issue with like casting early release. That tends to be something that helps them, because that more resistance further away definitely causes them to kind of load the club a little bit better on the way down as they get into a lot of our sequencing drills.
As you talk about sequencing, one of the things that I read from some of the people who might not have agreed with you, to give you the opportunity to maybe address these things, was that the clubs, as they're trying to swing them faster, that the ones that are too light were the percentage difference from a driver was too much, and that the kinematic sequencing actually went down, or it got worse.
In what way?
That instead of, let's say, from the transition, instead of starting with the legs and the hips and then the torso and then the shoulders, arms, hands, club, that it went, let's say it didn't have as much coming from the lower body as it started from the upper because it was too light.
Sure. So it would depend on what that club is relative to that player's driver. Like I said, we found that if we got below about 27% lighter than the player's driver, then we started to see, some significant changes in how the lower body was working in the swing. But if we're in like that range around 20%, will it be slightly, very subtly different than the normal swing? Touch, yes, but it will still be moving a lot faster, and those segments, the rotational velocity of each one of those segments, should be moving significantly faster than it did in their normal swing. And we found that to be that point where it was effective. But if like a player grabs like the senior set, for example, that has the yellow club in it, that's a lot lighter than even the green, and they're playing a standard men's driver, yes, the way they'll swing that yellow club will be significantly different than their normal golf swing. But that's one of the reasons we have a lot of different sets, that'll base more around the different types of weights of clubs that are out there.
So is that where the difference comes between a 20 handicapper and let's say a college golfer or a tour pro?
Now, it's hard to say because like your 20 handicapper can be a very different type of person. Like I've got I've dealt with plenty of 20 handicappers that are pretty good athletes that can make the club move really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Now if it's a 20 handicapper who's 75 years old and swings the club at 80 miles an hour, that's another situation. Like that's somebody that I probably, number one, from a club fitting standpoint, probably aren't going to have in a really heavy shafted, heavy driver. Probably going to have them in more of an ultralight type club because they don't necessarily have as much strength or stability to be able to support a heavier implement that they're swinging. And then that would be one that would coordinate more up with one of our lighter weight sets so that we could get something in their hands that is in those percentage ranges relative to their club that would be different than a tour player.
So if somebody's listening and they get online tonight and they order a set, how do you know what set to send them? Let's say you got a guy or girl out there, 30 years old, decent athlete. Do they sing their swing speed, or how do you go about determining where they start?
On how to pick which set to get on our website, but I can go over it real briefly. It's a pretty simple system. We basically say, if you have a driver shaft in your driver that is 60 grams or heavier, you should be in our men's set. There's just one secondary factor to consider, and that's if your swing speed is under 85. Then we'd still consider getting the senior set, even if you have that heavier driver, mainly because from my perspective, I'd look at that and say that player might not be fit to the right driver, and therefore that might be a limiting factor in speed anyway. Then we go from there. So basically, if somebody has a shaft in the driver that's lighter than that, and they have, they're in a 45, 50 gram driver shaft, something that's significantly lighter, senior ladies type clubs, those things, we go for our senior ladies set. That would be there. And then as we go down, then it's more of a length thing. So like we recommend for players under height of about 5'2", if they're playing a shorter length driver, to get our junior set. And then we have two younger kids sets, one for like 5 to 7 year olds, one for 8 to 10 year olds, that are based on some common size drivers for those players. And we'd always say that if you're going to err on one side, always err light, don't err heavy.
Yeah, I would agree on that. One of the things that I saw a few weeks back, and I got a lot of respect for the guy, and I'm not trying to knock him or throw him under the bus by any means. I just want to bring it forward, was Bryan Manzella, right? He's very well, he's top 100 coach, teacher. He had, I think, a post or something on social media where he didn't agree maybe. And I'm Bryan, if you hear this, I'm not trying to say what you did was incorrect. I'm just trying to relate it, where he didn't think that what your guys were working on correlated to the swing because the weight at the end did not resemble a club head. So it didn't have a convergence into the full swing. But I say, look, some of the best things for ground reaction forces are squats and deadlifts, and they don't have a direct convergence in swing, but it's as close as we can get, right? So
I would say this in response, and that's that, speed training is its own animal, right? Like when we're doing this neurological speed training, I want as little else going on in that player's head as humanly possible, except just trying to make the thing move as fast as possible. That's all I care about. I don't want them thinking about having to rotate the club during the swing, hit anything. All I want them to do is try to learn new feels or find new feels in their body that are going to make that club head move faster. And then, it's incredibly important, to still apply that to actually hitting a golf ball. But I look at those as two separate training modules or two separate coaching modules that a player should go through. And that's where we found the most effectiveness. We found the most effectiveness in permanent speed gain by isolating the speed training, motor program specific speed training with Overspeed training, and then applying that to then, after that training session's done and that player's taking a little break or something, then we get up, and if we're going to try to work on speed training with driver, with hitting a ball, we're going to do that in a separate session, with some different rules on the coaching side, basically. So that would be how I'd respond to that. It's just an isolation of the element.
Yeah, and again, I'm not trying to pinpoint or poke at Bryan. I don't need him mad at me. I've never even met him, but we have some mutual friends. Everyone says he's a great guy. He seems like it, but I just wanted to bring that forward because he had hopefully your answer can maybe answer some things in his own mind, and if not, he can get a hold of you. You guys can talk about it.
Hey, we're always happy to discuss stuff. Like I said, I mean, we've done this in a lot of different ways, and we've just found that this one is very effective. And some of the things that you brought up there actually are very interesting too. I think, remember I told you that this was originally called overload underload training was the term for it in baseball. The reason we changed this to overspeed training is that we feel like a lot of those previous type of trainings that even have in baseball kind of mixed elements, if you will. And there's some of the stuff out there, especially in the baseball world, that still mixes elements. And when I say that is like, if I'm working on speed training, my goal is to make the body move faster than it normally does during a motor program that it already understands in order to reset what that normal reaction speed of the body is. That's overspeed training, okay? And that happens more as a function of using those lighter weight clubs to kind of take the governor off the engine. Now, the other side of that, though, and there is some benefit and value to this too, I just think it's a little harder to do on a very widespread basis like we're doing with overspeed training, but it's something that we now call overload training. Now, this has some different rules to it. Overload training, by definition, would be taking some similar motions, but not that specific motor program, but trying to get more motor units firing in the body during that motion. So that would be like taking a player and having them do some fairly heavy like deadlifts or squats or something that's going to get more motor units firing, getting the brain used to firing more muscles and parts of muscles in the body than it normally does, then to have them try to move really fast, then apply it to the golf swing. I think that could be considered somewhat of an optimal training approach, just a little harder to implement on a wide scale basis.
Yeah, I think it was in weight training. I want to say it was called Bulgarian wave loading. So like if someone's they have their 1 rep max, that they would start somewhere around their 90% max, and they do 4 to 6 reps, and then they do 95%, 97, and then they do 100%, and then you do 105%. Mm-hmm. And when they went back down to 100%, they could do it more than the time they did it before.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and it's just about how, we have millions of motor units in our body, just, neural connections to muscles. And we, by default, don't use 100% of them to do most motions. Because again, your brain goes to path of least resistance. If you're asking somebody to squat down and pick up a 1-pound dumbbell, they're obviously not going to activate nearly as many motor units as they will if you're asking them to squat down and pick up a 200-pound weight. Right? Because it's just not necessary. So if you can pre-activate a lot of those muscles with that overload training, in theory, you can actually get even bigger results when you start to then try to make the body move fast with lighter weight.
Yeah, I would agree, because you're getting more stabilization. The muscle you're getting more muscle recruitment, but you're also using the same pattern that we talked about going back to the beginning of our talk.
Absolutely. So what happens there, though, is like a lot of these previous things, especially in baseball, would mix those two topics. They would basically like use a lot of heavy type balls first and then go to the light ones, and that would have like that negative effect on the neurological, but the positive on the overload, and then they'd go to the other ones, and they weren't getting as much out of it as I think they could, because they were kind of combining those two. We find that overload training is much better done outside of the actual movement you're working on. So I'd rather do overload training. This is kind of like the heavy club, but I'd rather do like that type of training. I'd rather do that with just weights, just like with fitness equipment weights outside of the motor program, and then keep the motor program specific training on the overspeed side, where we're always telling the brain that the body can move this fast, that can move faster than normal.
Yeah, where I saw that in a play. You're in Chicago, I think, right? Or are you still in that area?
I live in Denver, actually.
Oh, are you still are you a hockey fan?
I was in Chicago during the entire Blackhawks reign, so how could I not be?
So by default, you're a hockey fan. Ron Wilson was the coach, Washington. Then he was the Sharks, and he was the U.S. World Cup coach. He lived here. We used to play a lot of golf together. And one season, that Ron went back, he had his guys training with pucks that were a little bit heavier. And I can't speak to how much heavier they were. And he was training with the guys. And then he came back that summer. So his off season, we played golf. I bet he picked up at least 35 yards on his driver, minimum. But now you take a hockey player like that, to your point of overloading and then underloading. They're overloading a little bit in practice, but they're playing then all week in games. And then maybe they overload when they go back to practice for a day for, let's say, a half hour, an hour, and then they go back to another week. So I've seen that effect in one sport. Whether it was just for him or somebody else, I never knew, but I always found that extremely interesting.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, we just had a study complete in Virginia at a really great baseball academy out there that did some stuff where they were actually doing some physical training with more like an overload type physical training right before doing the overspeed training. And their results compared to a lot of the other baseball studies that we had seen with our SuperSpeed Slugger products actually got a higher percentage gain. And we believe that that's a contributing factor to it. So just like I said, another piece to throw out there. A little harder to do if you're not in an environment with a trainer and a coach to be able to really walk through that process specifically. But I do think that there's value there for sure.
Let me ask you one question, and maybe this is a little bit off topic, but at what point is there somewhat of a law of diminishing returns? For example, I know Mickelson really got you guys a lot of exposure when he had your stuff, right? And he was swinging it, and he was saying how much faster he was swinging, which was great, especially for you guys. But his accuracy, it seemed to suffer quite a bit, even for Mickelson. It kind of, so I guess what I'm getting at is, at what point does the increased speed? And I know you look at Mark Brody and some of those guys.
Stats on that, and I'm not sure that it actually decreased much for him. It was pretty similar to what
he's pretty erratic anyway. Maybe he's not the best.
Honestly, though, I do believe statistically it didn't actually do that much. Let me hit this on a couple sides. First of all, as far as like diminishing returns of the actual training gains, it happens in a cycle. So like, when you pick this up, you're going to see a jump in speed of like 5% if you're hitting a ball before to hitting a ball after, usually after like the first session. And then over the first 6 to 8 weeks, that'll, if you were to measure before and after every single time, the before speed kind of gradually creeps up to about what that jump speed was initially. And then you enter a plateau phase where they're about the same for a while. And then usually in about the 4th, 5th month, you see another little jump. Usually that one's about 3 to 3.5%. Then about 6 to 8 weeks, it normalizes, and then another plateau. So from just the training standpoint, that theoretically continues forever with smaller jumps and more time in between them. As far as diminishing returns on gaining more speed for your golf game, I'm a pretty big believer that doesn't exist. I can tell you that the people we work with on tour and have talked to out there definitely do not believe that there's a point where they don't want to get faster than X. Like, it just, there's always an effective advantage to creating more swing speed, as long as you're able to control it and you have the skill to be able to use it. I would say for amateur golfers, I think swing speed is one of the most limiting factors in amateur golf around the world with most people that play the game. You know, just from a standpoint of getting the ball up in the air, getting enough spin on it, being able to control it on the green, all of those factors are incredibly huge. So, you know, I don't see that you find a lot of diminishing returns there either.
Well, I shouldn't say, let me rephrase. I shouldn't say it was diminishing returns. What I should say is it's one thing to increase speed of the club head, but it's also another to where it what I meant by diminishing returns is you can make the club head go and the club go faster, but if your body doesn't have the capacity or can't keep up with that, now you're going off in different directions, and you might hit it further. But if you're hitting it crooked in the wrong direction, you know, that's not really going to help somebody.
Yeah. So I'll hit that on a couple sides too, though. So the first thing that I would say to that response is, you know, number one, most people that are suffering from poor club speed or lack of club speed, a lot of times in the amateur world, it is due to like some type of sequencing or ground reaction force inefficiency that's going on. And when those things become more efficient, we tend to not only see that player increase their ability for speed and power, but we also see their ability, to be able to consistently put the, club on the center, or put the ball in the center of the club face, usually improve as well, because we're improving the overall efficiency of that player's golf swing. So that's one of them. The second way that I'd really go about that too is it really depends on where the player's starting and what their skill levels are, right? I'm definitely not proposing that, using super speed golf is the end all be all, the only thing you ever need to work on for the rest of your golf game. I think it has a lot of great benefits, but I think there's still a lot of different skill drills, ball flight control drills, centeredness of contact drills, all of those kind of programs and practice strategy that, players should definitely also be working on. So, yeah, I mean, if a player goes from 90 miles an hour club speed to 100, and they had poor face control and poor skill when they're at 90 miles an hour, they're probably going to still have poor face control and skill when they get to 100, and that could potentially make the ball go further sideways. But I would tell that player that it wasn't a bad thing that they gained 10 miles an hour club speed. I would tell them that, you really need to work on ball control skills so that you can learn to center it up and hit the ball straighter too.
Yeah, and I would say, when I asked you earlier what might be a misunderstanding, is you guys are focused on increasing the speed. And usually when you increase the speed, you're going to lose direction until you can learn how to control that speed. But right, like Sasha McKenzie did that study, and I think who is it? Corey Walker, I think, has that podcast. And what the hell's the name of it? Anyway,
I'm not sure. Yeah, I've been on that one actually too. And Sasha's stuff, I mean, look, it's a principle in biomechanics called the speed accuracy principle, that as things move faster, it requires a greater amount of skill to control it to the same level. And
exactly.
That's true. And I don't disagree with that. I just also do truly think, though, that if somebody's really interested in working on their golf game and they're swinging a golf club at 85 or 90 miles an hour with a driver, that's a huge limiting factor. And depending on how, what skill level that player's at, we see a lot of players that, they have actually really good control skills. They have good, they've learned how to control the face of the club and hit the ball in the center of the face pretty well. And they generally are really, really accurate. But their limiting factor is that they're only swinging the driver at 88 miles an hour, and they just are behind the 8-ball from a distance standpoint, and they can't hit their 6-iron far enough, and they're hitting hybrids and 3-woods into greens all the time. So I think that's another major factor that's out there, and that player generally doesn't have much of an issue, even if their dispersion increases by 5 or 10 yards off of what it normally was, it's still a major benefit to their game. I would say it's always a benefit to gain speed as long as you are also working on a lot of those control standpoints to be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's what I was getting. The misunderstanding is, if you're working on speed, which is what you guys provide them to do that, and where Sasha's thing went with Corey was, if you're practicing to reset the bar of where your speed is. So let's say you're swinging at 100, but you can really swing at 107. While you're in the process of learning how to swing faster, you're not going to be able to control it. So don't beat yourself up about hitting it more crooked, because you'll get that back.
Absolutely. And you will get it back. And I think it depending on the skill level of the player, you'll find that some tend to get it back very quickly. Like it's a really kind of funny inside joke, but whenever we put tour players through this the first time, on average, it takes a tour player, the fourth ball after they do the training, if they hit balls right after the training, to hit usually the longest drive they've hit in a year. So it's like 4 balls, and they've already kind of reset those tiny little pieces of skill to match everything up to where they want it. For somebody that doesn't have a high level of skill, it may take a little bit of practice after doing those intense speed sessions to be able to really apply all of those things to the golf game. But yeah, like I said, I would just seeing that in practice, people don't have as much trouble with that as you might think theoretically. It's amazing how fast people are able to get it back to going right down the middle and 20 yards further.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, obviously, once they get that, you're right. You got to reset the speed mark, and then let the body adapt, and everything will reconfigure at a higher level. You guys have an awful lot of tour players around the world using your stuff. How did that come about? Because breaking into that realm is not easy.
Yeah, I mean, we were managing a very high performance golf academy. We had a number of tour players that we did work with at the time. So we had some of those people that got out and used it. It just caught on kind of like wildfire. And we did, we were at a lot of events. We were working with a lot of players with it. But, when one guy sees somebody jump up 6, 7 miles an hour, they're out there and all of a sudden they hit the ball 20 yards further than they did the week before. The next player in the group looks over and like, what in the hell is that guy doing? Right. And then, they're calling us. I mean, I will say this, we've never endorsed a single tour player around the world. And we are up to over 700 tour players working with it on various tours around the world,
Mm-hmm.
including about 110 active tour PGA Tour players that we know of. Some of them are more secretive than others. Um, but I mean, we've never, like I said, we've never really endorsed anybody. People have used our products because it's helped them, and I feel like that's the biggest endorsement we can possibly get. People are willing to either buy our products, or we've had a few occasions where we have a rep out on tour now that will give those players equipment. Usually, we try to get a photo from them or something that we can throw up on the website, but that's only been in the last year and a half. Before that, most of those guys that had it out on tour bought it. We were always we always joked about it when we were back in the day when it was still, in the early stages. We'd get an order come through and we'd see a name. We're like, is that really William Horschel? Is that really Billy Horschel? And we'd like Google the house. We're like, yeah, that's probably Billy Horschel. Just bought a set on the website. But, so that kind of thing would happen a lot. But yeah, I mean, like I said, a lot of people use it because, they feel it helps them. And, we very strongly feel that it works and will work for basically anyone that picks it up. So, like I said, we've been very, very excited and happy with the success of the program so far.
Take me and everybody listening through kind of the protocol. So someone gets on there tonight, they order it, they want it overnighted or 2-day shipping, they want it for Christmas. What do they do when they get it?
Yeah, so immediately when you get it, you just go to our website at superspeedgolf.com. You go to the training page. That's going to walk you through like the timeline of the different protocols. We have 5 main overspeed training protocols. Everybody we recommend to start in the level 1 protocol. That's just going to be more of an adaptation protocol. You're going to see jumps, but it's not a huge number of reps. And because this training is fairly intense, even though it doesn't take a long time. Those protocols should take you about 5 to 8 minutes to go through. And we only want you to do that 3 times a week with a day off in between for optimal results. But yeah, so that first protocol is just going to be normal golf stance, swings on your dominant side and non-dominant, moving green, blue, and red, through the clubs light to heavy. And then we do our step change of direction, swing on the dominant side, non-dominant side, light to heavy. Finish with a few swings with the light club and you're done. Obviously, we want you to go through the dynamic warm-up that's up on the website as well before you do that. About 6 weeks later, in the 7th week, you move into our level 2 protocol. That adds kneeling swings into the process. We then move to our level 3 protocol, then 4, then 5. So it's really like nearly 2 years worth of training that's up there on the website that's included for free with the product. Actually, that's for free no matter if you have the product or not. You can go to our website and check it out right now. That's all there. We also do have some advanced protocols that are more specifically targeted at ground reaction force, rotational sequencing, or lag and wrist mechanics. So those we recommend people start doing around the 20th week if they have identified major deficiencies in one of those areas. Junior protocols, all that kind of stuff. So there's a whole lot of information up there on the website that really can walk you through the process of getting the most out of SuperSpeed Golf Training.
It's a three day a week training program that you put together?
Yep, that's what we recommend. So we found that more than that isn't better because like speed training, again, it's different than strength training, right? We're trying to have short number of reps with maximum intensity on each rep. So we find that if people do it every day, they actually have a harder time maintaining those peak speeds. So we like a full day off rest in between. So 3 days a week. And then, like I said, it's about 5 to 8 minutes per training. So like, let's round up and say 10. In my opinion, if somebody doesn't have a half hour a week to gain 20 yards, they're not really that serious.
How are there a certain amount of reps that they're required to swing in those training days?
Yeah, each one of those protocols has a different number of reps. The level 1 protocol is a total of 39 swings, with about half of those being on the non-dominant side.
And what does it progress to at some of the more advanced?
Yeah, up to level 5 gets up to somewhere around 78 to 80 swings, so it's about double. But that level 5 protocol, we don't recommend. If you were to do this training constantly and never stop or never take any breaks, you'd get to that protocol about a year into the training. So that's after you've been doing this and are fairly well acclimated to what it feels like.
Are there, because I'm somewhat well versed in the muscular response and the neuromuscular response to training. Is there, for example, when you're training, you're putting maximal effort in. It's not so much that the muscle needs to recover. It's more the neurological system needs a recovery. Yep. So in between swings, is there also a protocol for rest in between? Not so the muscles are ready to go again, but so your system is ready to go.
I mean, we don't give people specific instruction on that. We basically just say we want you to maintain maximum intensity on each rep. So if that means for one person they need to rest for 5 seconds in between and the next person it's 20 seconds, I really don't care. I just want each rep to be maximum intensity. If you have one of the little swing radar devices that we use, we tell people if they see 2 swings that go down in speed in a row, they need to take about a 20 to 30 second break to recover and then continue.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm not knocking, I'm just giving my thoughts on it. If you're working maximal effort, let's just, I'll use the weight room because a lot of people training nowadays are in the health. If you're doing, maxing out your neurological system, you're taking up to 2 minutes rest period before you go back again. And if you're doing high reps, you're taking, let's say 30 seconds in between your sets. Was there any consideration from that aspect, since you guys are pretty well versed in that?
Yeah, I mean, we've found that most people in 39 swings, most people are able to maintain pretty good effort through that protocol. As far as maintaining consistent higher, significantly higher speeds than they're training. But again, everybody's a little bit different. If they need to take a little bit more time, or if it's getting them really, really taxed, obviously I would rather somebody take more rest time in between than just swing and go slower.
Yeah, right. You don't want if you're practicing speed training, you don't want them swinging slower. That's for sure. What about the number of reps? Is there any concern that if they're playing golf regularly, or even if they're playing a few times a week, but let's go to the more advanced elite players. If they're already swinging and practicing a lot, and now you're adding in, was it 80 to 90 swings or so?
I mean, that would be in like the level 5 protocol. Most of the people are not really doing that even at that level. It would depend. Like it depends on how those programs go. Like when they're 2 or 3 years in, like the stuff Mickelson does is not nearly that number of reps before a round. It's just enough to get everything firing. We've found that protocol does have success with players like in that year and a half range where they're really trying to get those successive little bumps in speed. But I would say that as you get to those, a little bit more rest is usually required in going through the protocol to really maintain max effort. In the level 1 protocol, it's not that many reps, so it doesn't tend to need nearly as much of those interval rest periods.
Have you gotten any concern from either players, their trainers, since you're around the tour pros so much, on overuse? Because as they're swinging, they're playing more, they're swinging harder and faster, and taking care of their body obviously is what's making them money, and avoiding injury is a concern. Have you talked to any of those guys or girls about that stuff?
Well, again, one of the points is that we don't hit a golf ball during the training, so there's not a lot of those residual forces that player gets when they're hitting balls that can be damaging. And again, because it's such a short training session and I would say it's not that many reps for a tour player to do 39 swings with half of them being on their non-dominant side. So you're only really looking at about 20 swings on their dominant side. Okay. That's not a huge load for a lot of those players, just in the normal course of what they're doing in a week. It's not adding that much. And then like for a tour player, when they're just starting, we're going to be recommending that they do that on non-tournament days. Like in a tournament week, they might do it twice a week instead of 3 times. So there are some of those considerations that we would take depending on schedule.
Yeah, because you don't want it throwing off their timing. You don't want developing a faster timing, and then now they don't have the control during the
Yeah.
tournament week.
So what we find there is that, again, if it's in the first little bit, so we see that jump in the first session, right? And then I told you there's like a 6 to 8 week normalization phase.
Right.
During that normalization phase or that early part of the training, if you do the training immediately after it, you're going to be significantly faster than where you were before. And unfortunately in golf, baseball is easier because like 20 feet further over the fence is always good. In golf, like 10 yards over the green sucks. So like that's why we do monitor that a little bit for competitive players, that we'll do the training away from like the actual tournament day, and then they're doing their warm up to hone in everything they need before that round and know exactly how far those shots go and everything where they are anyway. So they're fine with that. Once you get into one of the plateau phases though, so after that like 8 weeks, there's usually a course of usually at least about 2 months there where you're not going to be seeing a significant gain before and after, because you've kind of solidified that first speed gain and you're kind of stabilized with it now. Then it's much less of an issue. Then players, if they want to do it before a round, it really doesn't have a negative effect. So it kind of depends where you are in the course of the training.
For a lot of the players that you're either in regular contact with at either in your schools or at an elite level, that they're picking up significant speed. Are you finding that they have to change their shafts? In other words, they have to go a little stiffer?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like good example is a mini tour guy that we were coaching back in Chicago. We were just starting this, went from 100 and he was like 106 average, went up to, in 6 months of training, went to 118. He not only retooled like the shafts and things through his bag. He had an additional like driving iron in the bag that he could never hit before. It's way more. Yes, if you get the answer is yes. If you gain 5 or 6 miles an hour of club speed, even, you should definitely go get refit for clubs, because that's a huge piece in optimizing how far the ball goes, and it will be very different than what you had before.
Yeah, because as you start picking up that amount of speed, you're going to overload the shaft on the amount of energy you're giving it, and now if the shaft's not able to hold that energy, it's going to start kicking it out sooner, later. It's never going to be consistent.
Yep. Absolutely. So that's just another piece, though. I would say we recommend people go through that 6 to 8 weeks, but then find where it is when they get stable, and then recommend that would be when they would get fit for clubs.
Mm-hmm. Do you recommend a cueing, so to speak, to students when they on the application of the intent of the speed, and then where would they push that accelerator down?
All I really want to tell people is I want you to make the club move as fast as you can down through the hitting area, and that's the only cue I give people. And I might yell at them to keep trying to make it move faster, but I really am just a big believer in sort of discovery learning and not over coaching things until it's necessary to intervene. And I find that at least in the first 3 to 4 weeks of that training, people are going to figure out how to sequence better. They figure out how to use the ground better. They figure out how to lag the club better without you ever telling them how to do it or what they're doing wrong or anything like that. If you just let them go through that training, hopefully with one of those speed monitors to try to really max out that speed at the bottom, it's amazing the results we've seen in people being able to fix a lot of those issues we talk about in the swing without ever having to have someone tell them they even had a problem in the first place. And that for me is like gold standard in coaching.
Have you noticed either the lighter, and we talked about the speed versus the overloading a little bit, but have you noticed lighter or heavier helping more people, or is it more person specific?
The reason that we have all three of those in the course of the system training is that we've found that to be the most effective package to help the most number of people across the board. And the way I would put that is that if somebody's primarily like one of the people that needs the neurological piece, the light stuff's probably going to help them a little bit more. Okay. If they're the people that have more of the mechanical sequencing ground reaction flaws, sometimes the middle and the heavy can help with that a little bit more, but the other piece isn't there. So like, if that's the person, the light one doesn't hurt them. And if it's the person that needs the overspeed stuff, the red one doesn't hurt them because they're still able to move it a lot faster than their driver. So that package is the most effective broad spectrum, if you will, for everybody.
Is there any exercise a golfer could do to get going faster, and what would it be? 'Cause you're obviously around a lot of very smart people.
I mean, exercise is a lot harder. Again, that's not my area of specialty, but I would say that that's just so player specific. Like, it just depends so much on what they have. I think motor control, maybe if I had to pick one that anybody could improve, would just be like disassociation motor control, like between the pelvis and the torso, would be huge. Being able to stabilize one segment and rotate the other segment independently.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the first thing that I feel like at our academy, I want to say 85 to 90% of the people that we had would have that drill in their program, because even if they could do it a little bit, making that better is always effective.
I got this question actually from Martin Chuck, and his first one was, have you noticed anybody scuffing the weight tips as they swing the club? That was just kind of a funny one, but
No,
he actually,
absolutely. I mean,
that wasn't even a question. He was just kind of making a light joke.
No,
but
I mean, we tell people in the instructions that, you know, we recommend you do not hit the ground with this, and that actually helps people promote a little more speed. Obviously, you know, it's not, you know, it's definitely possible that people do from time to time. I mean, we've seen all kinds of crazy stuff. In fact, the world record, to my knowledge, for flight of a super speed club is about 175 yards. I think that club's still up in a tree at a course in Chicago, but they are almost like lawn darts. Those things can move if you let go of them. I recommend wearing gloves too when you do this. But yes, all of those things that we try to keep people, you know, with those kind of simple instructions. But yeah, I mean, simple, easy instructions, simple, easy cues, so that, you know, people can really kind of, even in a lot of ways, get out of their own way and access a lot more of that athleticism and speed that they already possess and just, you know, have forgotten how to use.
Martin's more serious question was, have you noticed any accidental benefit to hovering the club above the ground?
So like you would say, like hovering the club above the ground when you're trying to hit a ball.
Yeah. Is there been any benefits? Yeah, because they're obviously not going to hit the ground with your device.
Yep.
And, you know, you take someone like a Nicholas who hovered it above the ground, and Greg Norman who hovered his driver above the ground. So as they practice with the super speed sticks, have you seen any benefit, or has anyone give you any feedback that there was more benefit that they learned, or they just got so used to hovering your device above the ground as they swung it that they started doing it with the driver, and they saw a difference?
I haven't seen or heard of any specific feedback on that point, but I mean, it would make some logical sense to me that, you know, when you're standing over the ball, and, you know, because there's a lot of like triggering, right? So like if I go back and feel exactly the same way as I felt over the ball when I was slower, that could trigger me to go slower again. Whereas if I do something slightly different that's similar to what I'm doing in the training, that might trigger me to you know, move into that more faster mode that I was in. So, I mean, I could definitely buy into that a little bit for sure.
What I know we touched on a little bit earlier, but is there any recommendation that you have as someone is working on a strength program and using your product? Is there any sort of protocol that you would advise that they take, or is it more of a trial and error?
Is that, you know, day one, if there's any pain, I think it's really important to address and get rid of that before you do anything, whether it's physical training or the speed training. You know, if you're going to try to like put this type of training in at the perfect moment over the course of a bigger, you know, like fitness program, if it were me, I'd love for somebody to, you know, have worked through some of the functional mobility concerns and maybe like some of the muscle activation and motor control concerns. You know, maybe before I start speed training, if possible, just because that's going to allow them to use and recruit a lot more of those muscles that could help them gain even more speed and power when they do the overspeed training. But again, you know, we've tried to create the program so that that's not necessary and you're still going to get gains. But yes, in a perfect world, if you're working with somebody that can help you maybe alleviate a few deficiencies on the physical side, and then really start to take advantage of those new strengths you have with something like overspeed training, I think that's very effective.
Now that this is for our hemisphere, this is the off season. Would you say or recommend that this is the time to start that, or Is any time a good time to start? You wouldn't necessarily start in the middle of the summer season, would you? Where somebody's going to start picking up distance and now they're all over the place, or
It really
not all over,
depends
but
on.
hitting it too far.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on what your goals are, right? Like, I mean, I think a lot of people, like your weekend warriors out there, are probably more interested in hitting it past the guys in their foursome than the ending score on their card sometimes. So, like for that person, it might not matter. For a tour player, am I going to have them do it? Start the training the very first time, the week before the Masters? Absolutely not. Um, so I think it really just depends on where you are from those aspects as a player. Um, I think the off season is the perfect time to get started and get yourself through like that first 6 to 8 weeks of kind of that normalization, and then after that, see what kind of gains you got, and then from there potentially, maybe get refit for clubs and really get yourself dialed into a really good mode for the beginning of the season, and then during the season, maybe it's something that we always recommend to keep doing the training, but you can reduce the frequency a good bit and not lose any of the gains that you've gotten. Like we'll see players move that down to once a week, even twice a month, and still maintain the gains that they've gotten from it during season. And then maybe the next off season, they push into the more advanced protocols, get those secondary jumps, and then do the whole thing over again. So I think it depends. Some people go straight through the program and just keep progressing through. That's been effective for people too. So there's a lot of ways to skin the cat on that one for sure.
Do you find that some people might start with one level of your product, and then as they advance, let's say after the first year of training with it, that they have to bump up to the next stronger one?
Well, we recommend that people, if they're going to continually do it, like we recommend like 6 weeks in the first protocol, then 8 weeks, then 12, that kind of thing as it goes. So we recommend that they change that protocol more often than like once a year. But like I said, I mean, most of the people out, I would say maybe do it in a 3 month stint, and then they'll back off a little bit, and then I'd recommend then they pick up with the same protocol for maybe a couple weeks and then move to the next one, that type of thing.
No, I didn't mean the protocol, but I mean, let's say that they go through a full year's protocol with whatever um, weight or stiffness of product you have. Would they then move up to the next heavier
No,
to get the same increases?
no. So like if you're playing a standard men's driver, remember the primary fitting element is what weight of the club you're currently using. So
Mm-hmm.
it fits around your driver. You wouldn't really ever change up to the next one because you use all three of those clubs during every single training session that you do forever. So um, yeah, it would be more about like advancing the protocols over time to make those a little bit more like we progress some of the drills to more aggressive ground reaction drills and sequencing drills. So that stuff can be effective, but no, we would never really recommend switching sets unless that player changed drivers to something that would change us out of those weight differentials.
Okay, so only if they're changing their driver specs. Let's say they go from a 68-gram shaft to an 80-gram shaft.
That
Is when you
would
would
actually
recommend.
be pretty close to the same still. It'd be more if like they were in a 65-gram shaft and they went to a 45-gram shaft.
Yeah, that would be a
You know what I
problem
mean?
for them. I wouldn't recommend they do that. Arms are going to be flailing all over the place.
I'm just using that as an example.
Right.
Or if they went from a 45-gram shaft and bumped up to a 65 because they gained 10 miles an hour of speed,
Mm-hmm.
that would be a situation where they would need to switch sets.
Let's talk about your kids sets a little bit. It's becoming more mainstream that as kids grow that their windows for what they're going to train is optimal, and then that window
Absolutely.
closes, right? And then um, so do you have certain protocols for when parents should tell their kids or get their kids this stuff, and then okay, you're going to train for this, and then but keep an eye out for when this window
Yep.
starts to close it. We want to take you off
Yeah,
it so you don't hurt yourself.
I think again, like there's a lot of good science on the whole junior development side, and that's actually a major aspect that I'm very into. Again, trying to make things as easy and as simple for people as possible. You know, Obviously, training speed is never really, it's never bad over the course of development. And when you talk about those windows too, like that doesn't mean that's the only thing you train during that time. It
Mm-hmm.
just means that during that time you're going to train all of these different things from skill and mobility and stability and balance and all these other physical characteristics. maybe speed's just an emphasis during this like 5 to 7 period, and it's an emphasis during this like 12 to 14 period, right? Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
you're still training everything at all those times. And even in the times where it's not a speed window, we still are working on speed with our players during that time. So we kind of just recommend to get started with it. We recommend around age 5 is a good time to get started. And, if you're already 10, it's better to start at 10 than it is to start at 11.
Right. You don't want them waiting. They're actually losing because you miss those windows and you can't ever really get maximum potential, which is what you guys are really focusing on. You want to move into some rapid fire? I don't want to keep you all night.
Yeah, whatever you like.
All right. Now we just had the President's Cup, so let's say you made the president, or you either made the President's Cup or Tiger Woods called you up and said, "Hey, I got a captain's pick. I want you to play on the team."
Yeah.
What would be your walk-up song on the first tee?
Walk-up song on the first tee? It's got to be like "Eye of the Tiger" from Rocky, right? It's the best entrance song ever written.
That's a pretty good one. Bucket list golf course.
Augusta.
Haven't played that one yet? All the tour pros that
yet.
You've helped out, none of them say, "Hey, man, why don't you come
Not
on
yet.
down?"
I feel it coming in the next couple of years, but it hasn't happened yet. So that one's on the list still.
Last book you read. You're a very well-versed guy on a lot of different science. The last book you read was what?
I actually reread Moneyball was the last one that I read.
Your favorite golf club of all time?
Man, that's tough. I'm going to go with Titleist 905R driver. I think mainly one of my favorites I've ever had.
Well, if you're changing if you're working with your own stuff and your swing speed is going up, you have to change your shaft. Maybe it's not the favorite driver anymore.
Oh, no. I mean, this is like back in the day. I think it's just because that's kind of what I played, a lot like after college and when I was first really getting serious about golf. So yes.
All right, cool. Dream foursome.
Oh man, dream foursome's tough, man. I'd have that on like 8 different levels, but honestly, like at this point, I think one of my dream foursomes would mainly just be the team that I have put together here at SuperSpeed, because we have a lot of good players and most of us all work remotely, so we live kind of all around the country. So it'd be really fun actually to get all of our people together for a round of golf. That would be actually kind of one of my bucket list items right now too.
Cool. That's pretty neat. Biggest pet peeve?
Biggest pet peeve. Probably golf coaches that try to make everybody do everything the same way.
I think in today's world that's hopefully slowly going away with all the data that's been brought forth in the era we live in. So with all the pros and the exposure you have and people that use your stuff, who's the biggest celebrity in your phone?
Oh, biggest celebrity in my phone. That's really hard. In the golf industry or
whoever you think's the biggest one, it's fine.
Probably one of the bigger celebrities that ever tried our stuff was probably Justin Timberlake.
I'd say he's pretty big.
That's a big one. I mean, I've had a lot of good interaction recently with Michael Breed. That's been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we've had some big ones.
Cool. Do you get to play golf much?
I do actually.
With running a business, it's good.
I'm going to top off at about 130 hotel nights this year and over 145,000 flight miles. So this was a busy year as far as going around and presenting about Overspeed training and teaching workshops and giving workshops and taking workshops, and I really love doing that stuff. I will say though that like our slowest season with all of those conferences and things is actually in the summer, because most of those PGA sections and everything do their education programs in the winter. So I get a couple rounds a weekend at least. And I'm also in that point where I have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old at home now too. So that's a little bit of a limiting factor as well. But I got about 40 rounds in this year. So I'm still holding strong.
All right. The reason I asked you if you're playing is the next question was your go-to word if you hit a bad shot.
I can't say that on here. It's not appropriate.
That's all right. If you could have anyone swing in history, who would it be?
Oh, anyone swing in history? That's a really tough question. I've always there's a lot that I've really liked. I mean, I've always liked Nicholas's, even though it was a little bit different, if you will. I've always liked some of the slightly different swings that were massively effective. So we'll go there.
All right, cool. That's a pretty good one to follow. That's a good segue into the next one. Uh, Greatest ever, Tiger or Jack?
Uh, that's another really tough one. I feel like I would go with Tiger just because Tiger, I still feel like, is the person that has been able to learn the game of golf more efficiently than anyone else that's ever done it. Because he's been at that level with some pretty significantly different golf swings, and he's been able to get back to it. And I admire people that can learn things to that extent and that level greatly.
Yeah, and the amount of times he's changed it and still been extremely successful it just illustrates to further extent his mental capacity and his prowess to be great.
I mean, most tour players barely get through one swing change if that doesn't kill their career. He's done it 4 or 5 times.
Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, this has been really good. I hope that after people listen to this, even some of the people who might not agree with you have a better understanding of where you're coming from, what you've used to develop and utilize this product. I think it's helping a lot of people. For me, hearing you say that, look, we're trying to make something to help a lot of people, and you can't fine tune it to an exceptional degree like some people might think you should when you're trying to help the masses. And I think you guys are doing a good thing. And I also think that if anyone does disagree with what you're doing, I hope that they reach out to me. I'll get them in touch with you, or reach out to you and say, hey, I heard what you said and I disagree with this. Maybe we can chat about it a little more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're totally open to that. I feel like there's a lot of great coaches out there and there's a lot of great trainers out there, and a lot of them are using our stuff. And, for those that aren't, I think give it a shot. And if there's things that you can do with the product that aren't exactly what we recommend on the broad scale basis, and you get good results with your players, we're all in the business of helping people get better and get more enjoyment out of the game. So anything that we can do to help, like I said, we're an open book on all the stuff that we've done, and we're always trying to make everything we do better. So, please reach out, let us know, and let us see how we can help.
You know what was it at Andrew Rice's coaches camp a couple of weeks ago, and John Sinclair was one of the presenters, and his opening statement was he showed on the screen that there was this new something in science that was discovered, and everybody's kind of saying, man, this is great. We hope we can do this and that. And he brought up a very good point that he said, when someone comes up with something new in the golf industry, almost always one of the first responses, well, it won't work because of X. Right. And he's saying, as an industry, we kind of need to get out of that mentality. And if you don't agree with somebody, do it in a respectful way that says, hey, I think that this might help, or I disagree because of this, instead of just trying to tear somebody down. I think that's become too prevalent in this industry.
I mean, we just kind of take the stance of, we don't engage with a lot of that. Like, we're happy to discuss anything that we've done, and we're happy to talk about it. And like I said, we're always trying to be better as well. But we feel like being open and sharing information and sharing the things that we've looked at and how we've done it is the best way to continue to make everybody better. And I think there's a lot of people that are finding some really good success with our stuff, and we're certainly proud of the things that we've done. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone out there that's listening, Mike and his whole team were gracious enough to give a discount for anyone listening. So if you go to their page and you want to order it, when you get towards the end in the coupon sec, there's a promo code, and just type in Golf 360 and you'll get the discount that they were more than gracious to provide. So we really appreciate that.
No, you're very welcome.
So go to their, say the website again, Mike, so everybody knows.
Ours is superspeedgolf.com. You can get in touch with us at info@superspeedgolf.com if you have any questions. But like I said, there's tons of information on the website. Please feel free to reach out. We're always happy to talk to anybody about our stuff. So.
Yeah, and I'll have all the links and the promos and the links to your guys' page and site net where they can follow you and all that other good stuff in the summary. And wish you guys continued success, and hope to see you guys down at the PGA show.
Thank you. We'll be there for sure.
Wonderful. You have a great night. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed it, You can find more information on today's episode and other topics at golf360.blog. There you'll find the show notes and links related to this episode, as well as any other episode that we've done so far to date. If you're interested in improving your game and would like to learn more from yours truly by taking a private lesson, a half-day or multi-day school, club or putter fitting, you can reach me through the blog site or by email, pete@golf360.blog. So some of you may be asking, what is the golf paradigm? All you have to do is click on the homepage while on my blog site to discover how you can start playing better than you ever thought possible. Or you can simply sign up, again, on the blog page for my instructional videos where I give regular tips on all areas of the game to include the swing, club design and fitting, health, fitness and nutrition, the mental aspects, and equally as important, the integration of all those things together. I'm also on social media, and you can find me at The Golf Paradigm. That's PARADIGM. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, also under the same name, The Golf Paradigm. Facebook is usually the best way to reach me for questions and or comments, and I look forward to hearing what all of you have to say.